Good evening, everybody, and welcome to America Emboldened. Tonight, we're going to step into one of the most debated and consequential conversations of our time: climate science. The one thing I know that can guaranteed get people on either side upset with me. But instead of dealing with the slogans of climate science of Al Gore or the headlines the different political parties use or talking about political talking points, tonight we're going to go straight to the data. We're going back to a guest that we had on the show probably about a year and a half ago. Chris Michaels and I brought on Dr. Ned Nikolov. Dr. Nikolov is a physicist, climate researcher, and his work has challenged the conventional assumptions about how planetary temperatures are being determined. And Dr. Nikolov is well known for his research in the role of atmospheric pressure, as he stated on the show a little while back, in regulating surface temperatures, as well as for questioning the aspects of the traditional greenhouse gas narrative. And this work has sparked criticism in his life. It's serious discussion within scientific circles as well, which is exactly what science is supposed to do, especially science when you're trying to get the gold standard of science, as the Trump administration claims that they would like to have. And we're in a time right now where the climate conversation often feels settled in public discourse, but it's really unsettled beneath the surface. And so we're going to explore the physics, the models, the peer review process. We're going to look at what happens when research happens to challenge the prevailing frameworks that are out there, especially the prevailing frameworks that billionaires are making money off of. So I know, Michaels, I'm pretty excited to get Dr. Nikolov back into the conversation tonight. How about yourself? How have you been, Chris?
Been pretty good. Yes, this is going to be a good time because there's a lot going on. And as usual, it's up to no good. A lot of cities are implementing this 15-minute city program like Oxford. And I do believe they're going to try to run the climate narrative one more time.
Yes. Yeah, I want to bring up this graph that Dr. Nikolov has right on his X page, so you guys can check this out. And we'll give all these links out tonight. It's basically the greenhouse hypothesis versus Nikolov Zeller. That's his partner that he's been publishing these with, the climate concept. And there's some big differences here. And we're going to come back to this graph in a few moments here, but we're going to bring Dr. Nikolov up with us. And welcome to the show. Dr. Nikolov, how have you been?
Good, good, good. I'm now retired from the Forest Service, so I can devote a lot more time to climate research, because before I was only allowed to work in my spare time.
Yeah, I remember our first conversation. I was asking you, where do you find time for all this? And you actually said you had to be very careful in being able to carve out the time with your partner there in order to be able to publish these papers. But your resources and your talent of what you've been able to use within the data of satellite imagery, studying other planets are well appreciated. And so, happy retirement, that you can
Thank you.
be able to spend that time. That's a good thing, right?
Yes, I think if you have the passion, then you find the time. That's how it works. Because it doesn't feel like work. Once you have the passion about something, you discovered something you want to bring into the world, then it doesn't feel obligation. It feels fun, but it does put a lot of stress, but it's different kind of stress, not an annoying stress, but kind of you're trying to make it through, right?
Sure.
And so, yes, so it's a little bit different from regular work, I would say.
Well, we're going to get into that a little bit later in the show. I wanted to start off with you tonight. I had several people that were very concerned when Donald Trump took office that climate science and the work that other administrations had done was going to be completely undone under him. And they cited our withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accord as one of the things that they were afraid of. And I said, well, before you get all upset about this, let's challenge the conventional thought that you have about greenhouse gases and everything else, because I've had the opportunity to talk to Dr. Nikolov before. And so I would send out the episode that we did previously. But I wanted to bring up this graphic as we start the show so you can kind of take people through your work and explain what we're looking at and how this is part of the greenhouse theory versus your research of the climate concept.
So this graph, basically, it's a table, if you will. It summarizes the main differences between the greenhouse hypothesis and our new concept. And I should say in the right from the beginning that unlike the greenhouse hypothesis, which was proposed in the 19th century as a conjecture based on very limited information, in fact, there was no global observations on Earth, let alone different other planets. Our concept is entirely based on modern observations, so it's quantified with equations and everything, and the relationships are very accurate. This is not so. Some people call it a theory. I would say no. What we have done is a discovery, because theory is something like the greenhouse hypothesis, that you come up with an idea in your mind. And then if the science goes according to the standard procedures, which unfortunately it doesn't, you look for evidence, you look for data, and if the data supports your hypothesis, then it becomes a theory. If it doesn't support it, then you have to, look at the data and come up with something different. In our case, the relationship that we found across planets and the insights from that actually is based on real NASA observations. And that's very different from sitting and thinking about something and coming up with a hypothesis. This is why we call it a discovery. This is a discovery.
And I remember you sharing with Chris and myself last time we spoke that you're able to look at other planets within our solar system, atmospheric pressure, and look at what that does to the changes in temperature variance. Can you explain that maybe at the top of the show here so people can kind of get that same understanding?
So basically, our fundamental approach was that Earth is not different in terms of physics compared to the other planets, right? So our idea was, if there is a relationship or some kind of a pattern across the planets in the solar system, and Earth is part of that, those relationships are universal and they apply to all the planets. So we are trying to infer what is controlling the temperature, the global average long-term temperature. We're not talking year-to-year variations. We're talking about long-term average, say like 30 years or longer, which we also call it baseline temperature. What is the baseline temperature at different planets, and what is controlling that baseline temperature in terms of drivers, right? Wow, you have here my equation. This is maybe a little bit over the head of many people because they get scared of math, right? So what we did is we decided to gather data from NASA on all the planetary bodies. I have to say here, we're talking about rocky planets. Rocky planets means planets with a hard surface, not gas giants like Jupiter and Saturn, that if they have a surface, we're not aware where that is, because it's. So we're talking about moons and planets that have a known surface, and on some of those, we have landed probes that measure temperature, measure atmospheric pressure, and so forth. So we have good information. So after we gathered this data, this was research done prior to 2017. We analyzed all the data using a very objective approach called dimensional analysis, which is a technique to infer physically meaningful relationships from data without imposing any theory beforehand. It's like you approach a problem like you don't know what's driving it, and you just apply this analysis to see what kind of relationships you will get. So by applying this dimensional analysis, we discovered that the thermal effect of the atmosphere, not only on Earth, but across the solar system, we had 6 bodies, planets and moons with different levels of atmosphere, different composition, from Venus to Triton, basically, very wide spectrum of physical conditions. And all those planets, in terms of temperature, they fell on one curve, and this curve revealed what is the nature of the atmospheric thermal effect, which is now called, standard name is greenhouse effect. We're not using that name because even the mainstream science acknowledges that it's an incorrect name, because actual greenhouses do not work like that. Greenhouses, they keep warm inside because they prevent convection. They trap the heat because they have walls and they have roof, right? They prevent the heat exchange with the outside through convection or through mixing, right? Because it's a contained environment. Well, the atmospheres don't have anything like that. There is no roofs on the atmospheres. They're open systems, right?
Right.
So that's why we prefer to use the term atmospheric thermal effect, instead of greenhouse effect. But basically, they're equivalent in the sense that we want to quantify. We agree, and everybody has been known this for almost 200 years, that the presence of atmosphere makes the planet warmer than if the same planetary body would be without atmosphere. Like if you compare the moon and the Earth, which have the same distance from the sun, moon is way much colder, about 87 degrees colder than Earth, right? And the interesting thing is that the moon absorbs even more solar radiation than Earth because it doesn't have the clouds to reflect light back to space. So moon is like, that doesn't have any atmosphere. So everything gets absorbed basically on the surface in terms of radiation. There's a little bit of a reflection, about 13%, called albedo. Well, on Earth, the albedo is 29%. And that's because you have a lot of clouds that are white and they reflect light back to space. So although the Earth absorbs about 56 watts per square meter less radiation than the moon, it is 87 degrees colder than the moon on average. So that gives you an idea how strong the atmospheric thermal effect is on Earth. So we decided to look at across all these planets and see which variable controls and which of the parameters that are controlling and can fully explain this baseline temperatures across this wide range of planets, starting from Venus, which is closer to the sun than the Earth, and ending up with Triton, which is way far, the orbit of Neptune. And what we found is that the atmospheric thermal effect is actually a function of total atmospheric pressure. It's a nonlinear relationship, very, nonlinear, like a curve like this. But all the planets, including Earth and moons, they fall on that curve. Okay. So basically, the absolute temperature, baseline temperature on any planet depends, long-term temperature, which we call a baseline, it depends on two factors: distance from the sun, or radiation coming basically to the planet from the sun, and total pressure. The composition of the atmosphere does not matter. Anything else, presence of oceans, no oceans. Earth is the only planet in the solar system that has oceans and that has liquid water. And a lot of people, they bring this up and say, oh, well, but we're unique. No, Earth is not unique. The reason we have liquid oceans on Earth is because the physical conditions are right for water to exist in three phases: liquid, vapor, and ice, and hard, and solid. So this is a very important point because, yes, the conditions that you see on Earth are very different, but they are manifestation of the same continuum that we discovered throughout the solar system. Because, for example, water appears on every single body in the solar system, including Mercury. There is water on the moon, water on Mars, there is water on Titan, but everywhere else, it only appears in frozen state because either you don't have an atmosphere, or the body is so far from the sun, like Titan, for example, that the water is as hard as granite. It's because it's so cold, right? But if you bring, for example, Titan to the orbit of Earth, you'll have liquid oceans of water on Titan. It just depending how far it is from the sun. So water, appears only on Earth in liquid form because of the condition, because of our distance from the sun, and because our specific atmospheric pressure that we have.
So I have this graphic I want to include with this because I want to know how this gets related to the planets. You posted this about a week ago on X, talking about kind of.
Oh, this is the paleoclimate. Yeah.
Yep. So would this be something? Obviously, we can't do the same observations not being on the surface of these other planets. But is there any way that you could calculate whether there is a correlation with what other planets have seen with what Earth's paleoclimatology has shown?
So here I have to say that we don't have any data about the well, we have some very sketchy indirect evidence
Okay.
about the paleoclimate on other planets, specifically Mars. There are speculations, and that because there is evidence that there was once extended bodies of water on Mars, and this was 3.8 billion years ago. So the speculation is that that Mars had a thicker atmosphere, more higher pressure, and which we agree with. In fact, we have the exact calculations what this pressure was on Mars in order to have the temperature above the freezing point, so it can, because there is plenty of water on Mars, it's not liquid. But detailed records like this, the one that you're showing here for Earth, we don't have any. I mean, this requires, presence of probes and digging. It's not available on other planets, right? It will be very interesting to get, at least, say, for example, on Mars, to get such a record, but right now we don't have those. So,
okay. So in this, and that's kind of what I expected the answer would be. In this air temperature, global surface air temperature that we're seeing, you can see that there has been a decline for some time now. But as far as civilization, modern civilization, industrial revolution, and everything else, that would appear on the very, very, very tip of the far right of this graph. Am I correct?
Yeah, where it's close to the zero time. Yeah,
yep.
Right there.
Right around here. I have the mouse for those who can see it.
Yeah.
If we were to zero in on where it looks like it's at 7.85 or just below it, is there any uptick that we're seeing there, or is it still dropping?
So those data present a very coarse resolution series. Okay, so the time resolution here is 1 million years on this graph.
Okay,
all right. So within the last million years, we have a number of ice age cycles on Earth. And I have other graphs that, I think on the same thread, if you go down, somebody asked me a question. I think I posted a graph of the ice ages for the last 1 million years, about 800,000 years. If you find this, you can show it. But within this 1 million year, you have a variation of global temperature. If you go down a little bit more, I think there is some, go further more. This one.
This one? Okay.
Yep, this one. So this one is the high resolution, 1,000-year resolution in this case. Again, much coarser resolution than what we're talking now, decades or years, right?
Right.
This is 1,000-year, but it shows the cycles over the last about 800,000 years of the cycle of glacial and interglacial periods. Okay.
Yep.
So we had a number of those. And right now we are right there at the tip, again, where it's zero. We're in a warm period. Now it's called the Holocene, and that's an interglacial. And this interglacial is not the warmest of the last 800,000 years because the previous one was warmer, right?
Yep, you can see that here.
And there were also another one 400,000 years ago. The Holocene interglacial was also warmer. So the interesting thing here is that the ice ages are much longer than the interglacial periods. Interglacials maybe 10, 15,000 years in that order. We're actually pretty much now, at the end of that. And then the actual, decline in temperature and getting into the ice age and going out again, it's 80,000 to 100,000 years, sometimes 120,000 years, right? So all this period, although we live in a relatively warm period now, this whole period of 800,000 years, it actually is still part of the ice age because compared to the 50 million years ago, where there was no ice on Earth at all, right now we are much colder. We're much colder, right? And if you look at the graph that you showed before, the Phanerozoic, which is 540 million years, this one, you can see that the average temperature, according to this is not my reconstruction. This is actually done by a paper that was published last year, right? I have the author name here. It was published in, where was it, in Science? Or I think it was in Science. No, it was not in I forgot that. Anyways, so this shows that on average of this whole period Phanerozoic era, a Phanerozoic eon called rather, the average temperature is kind of a 22 degrees Celsius, which is much higher than the 14 degrees that is currently on Earth, right? So life has evolved in much warmer environments. And the ice ages that we have now, although we're interglacial, but overall, for the last million years, we're in an ice age, and it started 2.6 million years ago. We have only 3 ice ages like that over the last 540 million years. One was 445 million years. The other one was about 320 million years ago, right? And we're now the third one. So we can say that our climate is exceptionally cold compared to the period of time over which the life has evolved, which is 540 million years.
But that doesn't make all the companies that are trying to put regulations on everything any type of money, Dr. Nikolov. That doesn't that doesn't put policies and laws that countries have to put in place that penalize us, the taxpayers. And this is why I'm bringing you on, because this is a science-based, factual look at evidence. We'll get into satellite imagery. We talked about recent warming just now. But
so let me say this, that the scale matters a lot. So what we're seeing there, when I showed this graph with the ice ages over the last 800,000 years, the resolution is still 1,000 years. But within the last 180 years, we had some warming. So you have a high frequency on a decadal time scale. You may have something like this, and it looks like a warming for several decades. But if you put it in the scale, even of 1,000-year resolution, all of a sudden it kind of washes out, right? So the scale is very important, and people should not lose sight of the fact that what we have observed here over the last 150 years of warming, it's nothing compared to the big changes in climate that we see in the geological record. I mean, it's absolutely, it's a minuscule thing, right? And so you could not talk about climate crisis when those decadal changes in climate or in global temperature, they go up and down. They don't. I mean, right now we've been up for a while, for several decades, but what are several decades compared to the history of Earth? Even though compared to the last, the ice age that began 2.6 million years ago. I mean.
Okay, so this is a question that we brought up last time, but it I think needs to be clarified here too. You've stated that the greenhouse gas concept that Al Gore popularized in The Inconvenient Truth, you said basically that's like a drop in the bucket compared to what the sun and everything else is doing with atmospheric pressure last time we spoke. We agreed that pollution and things that are harming humanity are a very real and very present danger to us as far as cancers and everything else, and we should be mindful there. But can you explain to the audience why you believe, in Zeller, through your work, that the factories and things that are giving off these are not creating the warming as much as the trends of what we've seen in this other data, in your words?
So basically what we have now, this whole notion that burning fossil fuel warms the planet, it is backed only and is based on the so-called radiative greenhouse theory, which says that the thermal effect of the atmosphere is caused by those trace gases like CO2 and methane and those little, and water vapor also, right? But water vapor still is a trace gas. So those trace gases are supposed to capture the outgoing long-wave radiations coming from the surface of the Earth, right? And trap this heat and return portion of it back to the surface, and portion goes out to space. Well, this whole concept, what we found with our research, it's a long, if I start to explain it, it'll take us another hour just to talk about this. But this whole concept is fundamentally wrong. There is nothing like this happening in reality, okay? The entire thermal effect of the atmosphere is caused by total pressure, regardless of the composition, which means that with our burning of fossil fuel, we only, even in theory, we only affect a fraction of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We're not responsible for all the carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere right now. We only affect a fraction of that, with our burning, right? Well, even if you remove the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere right now, 100% remove it, life, of course, will cease to exist because carbon dioxide is a life of gas and required for photosynthesis, so all the ecosystems will die, right? And after that, everything down the chain, the food chain will die as well, including ourselves. But the global temperature on the Earth will not change. The climate will be still the same that we have today. Why? Because the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is minuscule. Its partial pressure is minuscule. Removing that has no effect on the overall thermal effect of the atmosphere, period. That's the thermodynamic explanation, and that's what comes clearly from our research looking at all these planets, right? So because of that, whether we're burning fossil fuel or not, if you actually understand that the greenhouse theory is fundamentally physically wrong, then everything else after that says, we are changing the climate because we're burning fossil fuel or our cows are burping too much methane, right? This is all nonsense. It is all nonsense. It's not happening. This is not what's driving the climate. The most recent NASA data, and we published a paper in 2024, I think it was after I talked to you last time. In August of 2024, we published data with the best available NASA data coming from the CIRRUS project. CIRRUS stands for Cloud and Earth Radiant Energy System, right? Those are sensors on several satellites that are measuring the fluxes of long-wave and short-wave radiation coming from Earth. They also measure the radiation coming from the sun. The short-wave radiation coming from Earth is basically the reflectance of the short-wave radiation that is coming from the sun because of the clouds and some of the surface features. About 29% of the energy coming from the sun is being reflected back to space, and that reflected energy does not contribute to climate at all. So what matters is the one that's absorbed. Well, the CIRRUS project has observed since 2000, we have a increase in the amount of absorbed. You're showing right now our 2024 paper. We have an increase in the absorbed shortwave radiation, meaning increase in the absorbed sunlight or solar energy by the Earth. Why? Because the clouds have been declining. This is in the official NASA data. What we have found with our research, and this paper reports on that, is that this decline in the albedo, it's called albedo, the fraction of light that is reflected back to space, the albedo of Earth has been declining, and it explains 100% of the observed warming since 2000. Nothing is left for greenhouse gases, or so-called radiative greenhouse forcing. Nothing is left for that. So the radiative greenhouse forcing that IPCC claims and all the mainstream science claims, it's all model generated, but it's not supported by the actual observations. No support. We have shown that the change in the absorbed radiation from the sun that is measured by the satellites explains 100% of the warming of the last 25 years. If the warming of the last 25 years is caused 100% or entirely by the decrease in the cloud cover and more absorption of sunlight, that means the prior warming, before we had the satellite, before we had the good quality data from CIRRUS, was the same thing. The warming, and there was a lot of indirect data measured on the surface and in other ways that actually shows the sunlight reaching the surface has been increasing since 1980. So you're muted.
I think we lost him.
No, I'm right here. I was being polite. I didn't want to speak over. This goes into two questions that I had about the CIRRUS data. Because I was reading up about the albedo, because you had a post on X as well. I wanted to get to understand this. So I think you answered my first question as far as what data sets for your conclusion. The part that I'm kind of wondering about NASA and how they interpret data versus how you guys interpreted. First, how did you quantify the changes in Earth's shortwave reflectance in order to have a trend that shows reduced cloud cover? And the cloud cover is going to go to Michael's, I think, in cloud seeding and stuff to get to that question later. Michael's, I know you're going to want to ask that stuff. I'm already on it. And then the second half of that is the shortwave reflectance, quantifying those changes. How do you evaluate Earth's energy imbalance using the CERES data? And how does that differ from how NASA is interpreting those same measurements?
So the actual reflectance, change in the reflectance on change in albedo, comes directly from the NASA data. This is not something that we have invented. This is the actual data, what they represent. So CERES measures the flux of short wave coming from the Earth, which is the reflectance, and it also measures the long wave radiation coming from the Earth, which is basically due to the temperature of the Earth, right? They have also measurements of the cloud cover, and in fact, in our paper, we're not discussing the cloud cover because it's kind of irrelevant. What we're looking at is the change in the overall albedo. So research that has been done by NASA scientists and other people, they have looked into the cloud cover changes. They do conclude that most of the change in the albedo, most of the decline of the albedo has been caused by the low level clouds and mostly over the oceans, right? So, so that's actual measurements. What we have done is actually convert this observed change in the shortwave absorption, or increase in the shortwave absorption, convert that into temperature, what this implies for the global temperature, okay? And so when we did this by applying an objective model, that is, the derivation of that model is shown in our paper, and it shows that it's based on basic spherical geometry and in calculus, in basic calculus. So the model derivation has nothing to do with the CERES data. It's not a statistical model. Actually, it's a physics model, and the equations that are derived, they predict, or they quantify how a given change in albedo and a given change in TSI, total solar irradiance, which is basically the solar constant. This is the radiation coming above the atmosphere, right? You know, if you have a vertical plane, a flat plane, and you measure the radiation coming from the sun before it gets into the clouds, before it gets into the Earth, actually, this is the maximum radiation that the Earth is exposed to, right? It's called the solar constant, but more technical term is total solar irradiance, TSI.
Yes.
Okay. So the changes in the TSI are small, and we have found in our paper that those changes have only marginal effect on the temperature. The main effect by far is actually the decrease in albedo and the increase, respectively, increase in the absorbed solar radiation by the Earth. So our model, it still accounts for the change in TSI and the change in albedo, and converts that, using objective math, converts that into change in global temperature. Once we have a series of global temperature calculated based on the CERES data, then we compare to the independent measurements of global temperature done by satellites and done also by surface observations. And those two time series, the modeled and the observed, match. They predict the same warming, okay? So, and because our model does not have any greenhouse gases, does not have any positive feedbacks, it only quantifies strictly the effect of changes in the solar radiation and also the small effect of the TSI, okay? And that, because that alone, those two things alone explain 100% of the warming, it tells you that nothing is left for anything else to drive the warming. Because, there is papers published by other researchers. Now, I have to say here, NASA has acknowledged the decrease in albedo, and other researchers have done this as well. However, none of them has done quantification of what that means, including the IPCC. We criticize them in a letter about this, actually.
Yeah, I was getting ready to bring that up next.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they have not quantified what this means. Well, the albedo has decreased. Probably it has a contribution to warming. Or maybe it's a feedback to the CO2 warming. Or maybe this, maybe that. There is no quantification. It's just words, okay? What we decided to do is say, okay, let's have an objective model that doesn't have anything else but the change in the albedo and what this means for the global temperature, and then compare this to the actual temperature records that exist on the surface, both measured from the satellites and measured on the surface. And we see a match. So that means that if the CO2 was actually having any warming effect, kind of a hidden, you would have a warming that is in reality measured higher than the one that the solar absorption can explain. But you don't have that. There is no room for another warming agent besides the increased absorption of sunlight. So that eliminates the whole idea that, oh, the CO2 provided the background warming, and then maybe it reduced the clouds. There are papers, on that hypothesis, which is totally ludicrous in my view. The first paper along that lines appeared actually in 2014, long time ago, by a guy in Boulder at NOAA, Kevin Trenberth. He proposed the hypothesis that the CO2 is providing the warming, and because the atmosphere is being warmed in the middle troposphere, it kind of melts the clouds, it gets warmer, so the water could not condense, and that reduces further, the cloud cover, and therefore enhances the warming. So he proposed, and this is based on climate models, which have a lot of problems, right? Well, the actual data and our analysis shows that there is no such thing going on. There is the warming that is caused by the increased absorption of sunlight is not a feedback. It's the primary and is the sole driver, period.
Okay. Interesting. Now, Michaels, there was this letter that Dr. Nikolov put out. And I unfortunately cannot make it much larger, but I will certainly link this in the show description as well for everybody to be able to read. But Dr. Nikolov publicly challenged the conclusions from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and did so in a brilliant letter that I have up on the screen here with Zeller as well, Dr. Zeller. I want to point out a few things before we get into this, Dr. Nikolov. I have 3 questions around this, but the first is, I want to go back to Al Gore's 2006 documentary, An Inconvenient Truth. There were many claims in that documentary that have failed to materialize. Snow was supposed to disappear from Mount Kilimanjaro. I'm probably saying that wrong.
Kilimanjaro.
Thank you. Yeah, it was supposed to disappear by 2016. We're 10 years beyond. And yeah, some of the glaciers are retreating a little bit, but it's existing perfectly fine. And the people that are looking at it here in the East Coast, we just had a crazy snowstorm that came through about a month and a half ago. And I experienced something that I might have learned about in science class, but I had completely forgotten about: sublimation. No. And all of a sudden it was 13 degrees outside, but the snow was disappearing. And my son said, "Dad, I know what's happening." I'm like, what's happening? And he goes, "I learned about it in science class." He's like, "It gets so cold, it's gassing off. It's not coming back to liquid." I'm like, "No, that doesn't happen." Yeah. And sure, sublimation is a real thing. And that's likely what's happening on that mountaintop. They said we'd have an Arctic ice-free summer by 2013, 2015. That hasn't happened. Massive sea level rise. That hasn't happened. In fact, all these people are buying all their luxury properties right on the ocean front. So obviously they can't be that concerned about it. Increased hurricane intensity and frequency. Maybe you could say that we had 1 or 2 storms, but if you actually look at it over the general wave, that hasn't happened.
The trend is flat. Yeah, there is no increase.
Yep. It's just, we have had 2 storms that are pretty major, but if you look at the overall life cycles of hurricanes, that happens. We didn't have a drying of Lake Chad. The only one that I'm really concerned about still to this day is the shutdown of the ocean conveyor. And the only reason I say that is because I believe that that's less climate influenced and something that actually happens due to magnetics of the Earth and anomalies on Earth over time. That we probably go through those type of things. But so
there was a paper, just to point this out. There was a recent paper just came out maybe a month ago that actually found that the conveyor, yes, it slowed down, yes, but now it's increasing again, and so it's going in cycles like everything else. It's going in cycles. So the conveyor belt could not be shut down. This is the last thing you have to worry about. I mean,
thank you for telling me that, because I've been concerned.
No.
So I guess in this open letter, and I'll put it back up here. There it is. In this open letter, what specific data sets or analysis did you cite here as insufficient or misinterpreted by the IPCC? Let's start there. Like, where are you taking them to task to start? Where do you think they've been incorrect?
So we have 3 points in that letter. I have to refresh my memory. I could not quite.
Yeah, I
see it
apologize.
here.
I can't make this larger on the screen.
Yeah,
I'm
I do have actually a link online. The letter is available as a PDF online, so
okay.
I should.
I'll go look for that too.
Yeah, I'll send you the link.
Okay.
So, but basically, there are 3 points that we are making there. Point number 1 is that the IPCC did not evaluate the contribution of the decreasing albedo on the warming, and yet they claim that it's all due to carbon emissions and talking about radiative forcing from greenhouse gases and all that stuff, and how this has evolved since 1790 and all that. But there is no, if you don't try to quantify the effect of what is the observed change in albedo or observed increase in absorbed solar radiation over the last 2.5 decades, you could not talk about that all the warming is due to humankind. You could not talk about this. So they have not done this quantification, and they still talk about it. So this was number 1, and I point out in the letter specifically with links to the chapters, and that I'm referring to, the IPCC chapter from the IPCC report. This is, by the way, the what's called the Working Group 1 report, which deals with the physical climate. IPCC has other reports dealing with the adaptation. Oh, there you go. Okay. So I'm talking about here the Working Group 1 report, which has to deal with physical climate, and I'm specifically, this is chapter 7. Okay. And so I'm pointing out here that they did not evaluate the contribution of the so-called solar forcing, as we call it, on the warming. If you don't have that, you could not claim that the humans have been responsible for the recent warming, because if they are responsible, you have to say, apparently they are not 100% responsible as a minimum. And I point out our paper here, which. They had the excuse because our paper appeared after the report was published, but I said, papers talking about the decrease in albedo has been published before the IPCC report was issued, so they even cite some of those papers, so they're aware of that. So that's number 1. Number 2 is very interesting situation where the IPCC have misrepresented intentionally the serious data in one of their figures, 7.3, figure 7.3 in chapter 7, okay? And what they show there is a change in the reflectance, the change in outgoing long-wave radiation, and the change in the net radiation, okay? Or the energy imbalance, if you want to call it that way. So the change in the shortwave radiation, reflected shortwave radiation, they call it reflected in the caption. But when you look at the graph, it shows like it's going up, not going down. Mm-hmm. And when I first saw that, I was reading that and it didn't make an impression on me. And then I looked at that and said, wait a minute, this is backwards. They have a sentence in their figure saying that they have used a special convention. Fluxes that are going downwards are positive, fluxes that are going upwards are negative, and they're coming up with this excuse. It's not clear, but they still call this reflected radiation when in fact they're showing absorbed radiation. So they're lying. So basically this is misinformation. They're deliberately, and then we contacted the authors that were responsible for this particular section in chapter 7. And one of them was Palmer in England. Actually, we came here with him, and he acknowledged that they have reversed the trend by multiplying the anomalies by -1. And he pointed us to a depository of data and code that they use for the IPCC. And sure enough, we found exactly the place. There is here a block article. If you can see the one in blue, we have a special article that describes in details all our findings regarding this misrepresentation of the serious data. This is a gross misrepresentation. Why? Because on the graph, they're creating the illusion that the reflected solar radiation has been increasing, which means the albedo has been increasing, while the outgoing long radiation has been decreasing. This suits their narrative because that's what the greenhouse theory says is supposed to happen. Mm-hmm. Well, this is not what the observations show. They show the exact opposite. And so they come up with this explanation of, oh, we have a special convention, downward flux is a positive, upward flux is a negative. When you're talking about anomalies, so if you have a time series, for example, of some information, doesn't matter, temperature, whatever it is, you can pick a period of time that say, okay, this is the reference period of time. And you have absolute numbers in this time series, right? So you pick the reference period and you say, okay, the average over this reference period, I make this 0. So then you calculate the departure of all the other values in the time series with respect to this reference value, right? This is what's called anomaly. This is how the anomalies are calculated. If you calculate the anomaly of a time series, you don't change the direction. You don't change the trend. You just scale, the whole time series. Instead of absolute numbers, you have, numbers that are basically departures from an arbitrary reference point. The reference point is totally arbitrary. It doesn't matter what it is. But the trend remains the same. The trend is not affected. So even if you choose a different convention about, which fluxes are positive, which are negative, the direction of the fluxes, this should not change the trend. And what they have done by multiplying the anomalies from series, multiplying them by -1, they change the trend. Now, if you change the trend of the reflected radiation, you actually get something that is called absorbed radiation. But they don't call it absorbed in the figure; they call it reflected. So it's a misconception. It's not misconception. It's a misleading statement. Why they have done this? Because they wanted to avoid, and if you look at this section that refers to figure 7.3 in the report, they did not want to have any discussion about whatsoever the effect of the decreased albedo on temperature. They wanted, oh, well, the albedo has been decreasing, yeah, but some place has been increasing. Oh, look at this El Nino year, but there is no overall analysis done, right? So to me, that was clear that they had to cite the serious data because they could not avoid that, but they did it in a way that obscures the whole reality.
Well, let's get into why maybe they would do this. So I was doing little thought policing here to see kind of what would change should all this happen. Michaels, think about this. If Dr. Nikolov is correct, the energy sector in the world would be completely transformed because the shift that we have, the solar, wind, batteries, hydrogen, all these mandates that were coming out would be largely unnecessary for climate reasons. Instead, it would just be a choice to make as human species. Fossil fuels would likely remain dominant much longer without some type of existential threat being pushed against everybody. We have carbon pricing and trading, carbon tax, as well as the cap and trade systems of the EU. They would lose all their scientific basis. They'd collapse. That would reduce costs for the heavy industries, aviation that's gotten dinged on their fuel cost. Would save trillions of dollars, but would disrupt the companies that have been tied to all these transitions, propped up by politicians like Al Gore and the people that were close to him and lobbyists. Subsidies that have put out, green subsidies like the Inflation Reduction Act that have in the United States or the Green Deal in the European Union would be seen as misallocated funds at that point in time. Agriculture and food would change because higher CO2 would be seen as positive. We wouldn't sit there and go, oh, wow, we got to get away with this because now it's enhancing photosynthesis.
Right.
It's enhancing drought resistance.
And it's documented in the literature as well, but in the NASA literature that the CO2 actually has greened the planet.
It's
For
correct.
the last 40 years, yes.
And then overall, the overall GDP, reduced regulatory burden on energy would boost short-term growth in developing nations. It wouldn't keep developing nations reliant on the big countries. And so I think that, there would be an existential crisis for the IPCC should this type of science come into the mainstream and be explored upon.
Yep.
And Dr. Nikolov, Michaels and I were just talking to you, and we were shocked to hear it sounds like Donald Trump. Michaels, what was the executive order that Donald Trump wanted about science? Do you remember?
Not offhand.
I'll put it up on the screen for you, Michael,
Yeah.
so it'll help you.
Yes.
Restoring
Go
gold
ahead,
standard
Michaels.
science.
How's that relate to Dr. Nikolov? Take it away, Michaels.
Oh, restoring the gold standard in science,
Uh-huh.
right? This is supposed to
Yep.
be we will follow the data, right? Not necessarily trusting the science as we did during COVID.
Yeah.
And Dr. Nikolov, if I understand, you were in fact doing such things, but you ran into some sort of opposition where people that were supposed to be restoring the gold standard didn't really want to. So there was vested interests to maintain the narrative. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. The vested interest in this case was not some kind of an industry or some kind of a big organization or something. It was actually the bureaucracy and the lower level managers in the federal government, because they are ideologically biased. They don't. And this is, we're talking about here, people that are in charge of managing science, in this case in the Forest Service, right? Directors of research stations that are supposed to take care of science. They're the ones that try to suppress this information, to the point that they decided to fire me because I had the courage to bring up published science to the attention of the upper management. We're not talking here conspiracy theories. We're talking about peer-reviewed research that I wanted to present, and I wanted to actually make them aware of, because they didn't know about it, that we have new climate science that happened. It was developed way before Trump became president, but it just happened to support fully the policy decisions of the current administration regarding energy.
So we're actually looking at the same old deep state, still well rooted in all of these agencies, aren't we?
Yes, correct. I have experienced this firsthand, what Trump has done, and I understand, logistically it's impossible to change all the levels of management, and president takes care of the top, right? Maybe
Sure.
the level, the top two levels, but not like going down, because those on the very top, they are political appointees, and that's what the president has the authority to change. The managers below that, they're career employees. They are not subject to election or politics, right? But those career employees in this case happen to be ideologically completely biased, to the point that they are willing, and they did violate executive orders of the president with respect to the gold standard in science, with respect to free speech. Not only that, they violated also my position description, official position description, which says that one of my duties is to inform upper management about new developments in physical sciences. And this is exactly what I did. I sent him a couple of emails. I quoted one of our papers, and I said, I'd like to give a presentation and brief you on that, on this new science. And long story short, it boomeranged back to me, and the station director decided to fire me because I dared to bring this up to the upper management.
Well, what exactly was the specific item that you brought up to them that they didn't want you to bring up any further?
I think when in one of my emails, I said we have a new concept about climate change, which is based on NASA observations, and that concept invalidates and has falsified the current greenhouse theory. So I said the greenhouse theory is fundamentally wrong, and I think that was a trigger that made them go berserk, basically.
Right. I mean, that's mantra at this point.
Yeah.
You cannot question. It's religion.
Right. In the U.S., it's a lot better, but in Europe, they actually, somebody told me, where was it, in Sweden, if you openly start talking about that the theory is wrong, you may get a visit from the police.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised.
You may go to jail. So they don't allow not only any questioning, we have skeptics in Europe, and I've been trying to work with a lot of them. They are afraid to speak up. They beat around the bushes, talking about the economic consequences of net zero, and energy becoming expensive, and it's so forth. But nobody addresses the underlying issue, which is that the theory is wrong. And they say, well, we could not go there because, it's like a religious dogma. I mean,
right.
Yeah, it's a scripture. It's a scripture. You could not go against the scripture, period.
Well, religious dogma came right from the Club of Rome.
Yes, that's true.
Did you know that, Michaels?
I didn't.
Oh, Nikolov actually, he put out a post about this recently. Let me put that up on the screen. Michaels is going to love this because he likes to get into. Matter of fact, we have a guest, Dr. Joseph Farrell, where we can get into this topic March 2nd when we interview him, Michaels, because he'll be into this. But Dr. Nikolov posted, did you know that the threat of global warming, now called climate crisis, was invented by the Club of Rome more than 35 years ago? And he has the book, and he has the quote, in searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and like would fit the bill. The real enemy then is humanity itself.
That's
Of course.
exactly right. Yeah, it's
Of course.
this is what I call ideology. This ideology came before any data were available, and actually they were looking for threats so they can create this common enemy which will justify the one world order, a world government. Right. That's the whole point behind this, right?
Right.
And so they've been pushing this for a long time, but so many scientists, thousands and thousands of scientists, are totally clueless about this history. And the funny thing is that they're not even aware of their own groupthink. I have talked to so many scientists, both sides, mainstream and the skeptic side. You would be amazed to see that how many of those people actually firmly believe this nonsense. I mean, the core nonsense in the greenhouse theory is the claim or the assertion that an open atmosphere that doesn't have any roof on top of it can trap heat. Imagine that. In the middle of winter, you remove the roof of your house and try to warm the environment by your gases that you release or something, which is CO2 mostly, right? From some parts of your body, and right. and try to warm the environment. I mean, this is absurd. That violates basically, second law of thermodynamics. You cannot have an open system that traps heat, that has convection in it. That there's no lid on top. This is the core belief, and you can see it, in the Al Gore's presentations. I mean, he recently he was talking about heat trapping gases in the atmosphere. Heat trapping gases. The IPCC uses that term. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Here's why I think that this conversation's timely now compared to where we were before. So in 2024, I think is when we last had you on the show. We didn't have people starting to wake up to what's been sold to them. I firmly believe that the Epstein files, just putting this out there, the Epstein files is opening people up to the horrors of the world and seeing that billionaires talk about the peons and peasants like us in such degrading ways that they see us as expendable, easy to be experimented upon, as eugenics, to see what data can be contrived off of us, easy to see us as products. And the horrors of the Epstein files are not actually the sex trafficking. The horrors are the conversations with people like Bill Gates and individuals that were meeting on the island for science events like Stephen Hawking's. And when you look at your data and your research that you and Zeller have been putting out there for some time now, I know not a lot of people have been paying attention to it. Yeah. I know that the IPCC has tried to discredit your work, but yet your mathematical equations, I think history is going to look kindly upon you in what you're putting out there. If you can see a world where there are people controlling it for their financial gain, that I'm asking my audience to keep an open mind about Dr. Ned Nikolov and Dr. Keller's work, in order to say, hey, why is it the IPCC has inverted this graph so the Ceres data doesn't look proper? Why is it that they multiplied it -1 or +1? I forget which one it was. 10 to the
-1. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Why is it that we aren't seeing graphs showing the data the way it is? How come I've never heard of the atmospheric pressures? How come I haven't heard of things outside of greenhouse gas? Well, if you're paying attention at all, the data's out there. It's just who have you chosen to listen to and accept as mainstream science. This goes back to COVID too, Michaels, when we were told to trust the science.
Right.
And we said, well, the consensus science says. Well, guess what? We've later found out the consensus science lied to us about 6 feet. It was a made up number and lied to us about many other things. We won't get into that because I want this to stay on YouTube. But the point of the matter is, the conversation of who controls the information, I believe that's finally starting to fall away, and people are seeing things for what they are, which is why this conversation, I think, is one of the most important podcasts I can do this year for a listening audience.
Well, thank you for that. I just want to point out this process of awakening of the population probably began with COVID, before the Epstein files, and now the Epstein files are bringing another twist on it. And also, I would say here, Kennedy with the inversion of the food pyramid and pointing out that this has been also junk science. I'm following several disciplines that are outside of my field of expertise strictly, but being a scientist, I can read other. So I'm informed about nutrition, for example, and in medical science, like the cholesterol problem, the cholesterol issue, and so forth, that they put in the medical science. I can tell you that from what I'm seeing is that this situation that I know for a fact in climate science that is based on a wrong paradigm. It's not unique for climate science. The same thing exists in many other fields, especially fields that are financially lucrative. Okay. Yep. So the medical science, the nutrition science, where big interest of the big corporations are involved, the science has been corrupt, and to the point that what is actually true has been called false, and what we have that is being pushed as a health advice or something real science is totally junk. It's opposite of the truth. And we're talking about not little things, but major. We're talking about paradigm shifts, And Kennedy is doing this with nutrition right now. He's trying, or general health, he's trying to reverse a lot of those things. It's not easy. He has the visibility, he has the power. I don't have anything except the science and the publication. So the other thing that people, on your show, I think a lot of people maybe start to realize that the fact that some idea is supported by a huge body of scientists or institutions, it doesn't mean the idea is correct. It doesn't mean that at all. In fact, historically, all the breakthroughs in science have always happened by a small group of people or individuals. And those people, small group of people or individuals, they were up against institutions. This starts from the Renaissance. We know the story of Copernicus, right? So what we see now, it's not unique. This has happened before, but people forgot, and nowadays they could not just wrap their heads around the fact that if something is supported by big institutions, in fact, you have to question its validity in the first place because it's being supported by everybody. Not the other way around, to say, okay, well, there is a couple of people here that are saying something else, but probably they are wrong because nobody agrees with them. And the challenge is that you have to have some expertise or have to have some intelligence and common sense to look into the problem, any problem that you're interested in, and you have to do your research to figure it out, because the answer is not easy. It's not being offered to you. What's being offered to you is normally propaganda and lie. It's not the truth.
100%. And I think the Epstein files also reveal that these individuals, these hyper elites, they, like Greg said, they pretty much detest us and they view us as lesser than. So what was interesting is that I don't have the exact details, but there was a scientist talking about new kinds of science. And he created a bullet point example of the benefits of it. And then he said, well, also, there's a militaristic version of it. So this has to do with the funding that we see.
Oh, yeah.
You're allowed to debate the science as long as you stay within a universe. Once you go beyond those boundaries, then you're a quack, you're shadow banned, you're obliterated from social media because they don't want you to go beyond that universe.
That's right, yeah.
And that's the real sad part of where we're at. And unfortunately, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, unless something drastic happens, some kind of shock to the system. I mean, you've brought up Kennedy and what's going on with food. I mean, I think if anybody had anything to do with their own health, it would have to be focusing on the right kinds of foods. Like I don't shop in the middle of the grocery store. I'm
Right.
usually on the outsides.
Yeah.
So fruits, vegetables, eggs, that kind of deal.
Meat,
Not really
dairy,
looking at
and
flashy boxes.
right.
So what have you seen as far as health is concerned? Because I know you've posted a couple of items on that.
Well, I had my own journey. I was vegetarian for about 40 years,
Yeah.
and not for health reasons, but because, I was practicing yoga starting at the age of 15. And, at that time, that was kind of it's still a dogma in that regard that, you have to be a vegetarian. It promotes spiritual growth. And, if you're practicing yoga, that's what you're supposed to do. And I didn't understand much of the science at all, not until age of 50, which was like 15 years ago. When I started kind of gaining weight a little bit, and I started, feeling not good, and then accidentally I came across a doctor, a cardiologist, who happened to write something on climate. There was some article, and that's how I found his name. And then I Googled him, and I found a speech, a presentation he made to some doctor conference, and there he talks about how saturated fats are good for your heart. And I said, what? Because before that, I thought, they're clogging arteries and all that. So I started my journey. I started studying those nutritional aspects, and and shortly after that, I discovered what I found already in climate, that the whole paradigm is absolutely upside down. It's totally wrong, and it comes down to a few individuals. One of them is Ansel Keys in the late 70s, 80s, when he came up with this idea that saturated fats raise cholesterol, and cholesterol it clogs your arteries. So therefore, you have to eat less saturated fat because if you want to avoid heart disease. Well, this was totally junk science. It's based on some correlations, and he picked the data. Out of 22 countries, he had only 7 that fits on the line that he wanted to show. And then there was another guy. His name is John Yudkin, who in the 50s, 1953, he published a book. The title is something like "White Deadly." Sweet and white and deadly, something like that, about the sugar. And he said the sugar is the culprit for the disease, but he was totally shut down by this powerful individual, Ansel Keys. In fact, Yatkin's career was destroyed, and he was discredited, and nobody paid attention for him for decades. So here we have and this has happened in history so many times. You have a few individuals, or maybe one individual at the core of it, that changes the course of history because of his delusion, and then millions of people suffer because of this stupid nonsense science. So the low-fat mantra in diet that was introduced in the 80s and continued until recently. In fact, they're still talking about. You look at journal advices about, avoid saturated fat. They're clogging your arteries. This crap is still being taught, although there are so many now meta-analysis published over the last 3-4 years that show saturated fats are neutral. They don't have, one way or the other. But there is other research that shows actually they're helping your heart. They're strengthening your heart.
Right.
So, they're also showing that it's helping prevent Alzheimer's. That there's been some correlation studies lately, not necessarily causation, as people like to say, that people that are taking statins are more prevalent to have Alzheimer's.
Right.
And I followed a lot of doctors over the past several years that have been talking about even the numbers that we have for cholesterol are arbitrary numbers because each blood type, each DNA is very unique to what is a healthy level of cholesterol for you as an individual.
Yeah.
There's a lot that the science is not as settled as people would like to believe it is, and continues on that rabbit hole.
And
the science is not settled, but it is corrupt.
Absolutely. Have you heard of Vil Hjalmar Stephenson in your studies? Probably not. Really obscure, right?
No, have not.
So he's a guy. He was an Arctic explorer.
The diet. Yes. I know that.
Back in the 1920s,
right.
when they first came out with this food pyramid where you need leafy greens and breads and cereals and everything else. And he went, "You've got to be kidding me. Then please explain how the Eskimos survive."
He lived with them for years, and he was on their diet, and he didn't have any deficiency of vitamin C, although there were no plant food at all.
Right.
And
So what was it?
Well,
It was.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
If I remember correctly, it was the liver. He was consuming liver, I believe, from those seals
Right.
and stuff.
Yeah. Well, they mainly ate fish,
Yeah.
seals, whale, caribou, waterfowl, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And some kind of vegetation like what they call cloudberries or fireweed. But it was mostly frozen, and the biggest benefit to this was the fat.
Yeah.
That's what let people continue to live their life in
Yeah.
the literal tundra.
Right.
Ice everywhere you look. It was the actual fat. Now, this is not a diet I would want to ever try because I can't even stand grizzle from a steak or chicken or turkey or whatever. But you could do it. So this whole idea that you need these kinds of foods 6-7 times or servings a day is absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that it is more about maintaining the sickness industry than anything else.
You
Right?
know, like Kennedy said, 3 words: eat real food. Now you have to define
Exactly.
what real food is. Real food is the one that you can get it yourself and you can make it in your kitchen. Here's the rule of thumb: if you could not prepare something that you see in the store, that you could not make it in your kitchen, probably don't buy it from the store. In other words, the level of processing that they
Right.
use in those industrial foods is such that you could never replicate this in your kitchen.
I always remember, if it's not on the corner of the outside of the store,
Yeah,
don't eat it.
Yeah. I was talking the other day to someone, and actually worker in the grocery store, and he was putting his, I asked him something, and he answered my question, and then he says, this is here the real food, and we were in the section of the produce, the vegetables and fruits, and I said, yeah, this is in the other section over there with the meat, and then the other one with the dairy and the eggs. That's it. What you need to buy here. All like 90% of the food that is being sold here, it's not suitable for human consumption. Actually, in the supermarket, it's like, if you want to be healthy, and now we're discovering that the industry in the United States, unlike in Europe, has been left to police itself with respect to what is safe ingredients and what is not. They're putting chemicals and crap in the processed food that we're now discovering are there, and because there is no agency, FDA is not looking over them, it's been left to the industry to regulate itself. We are using ingredients that are generally considered safe. That's the expression, generally considered safe. Well, those chemicals and petroleum products, they are not safe, but in Europe they have excluded them. The same company that will put them here in drinks and other foods here in Europe, they will not sell them because it's forbidden, and they will sell with other ingredients. So why they're poisoning the United States population? That's the question. I recently posted this on X. I said there is something going on here. I don't think it's cheaper to use those ingredients as opposed to use the natural ingredients, like for dyes, like you use a carrot juice to dye it instead of some kind of a number 5 dye or something, chemical. Why they're doing this? Is it financial incentive or because they can get away with? I don't understand. I mean,
I think there's some kind of coordination between big agriculture, big pharma, big food, and big insurance. Because a lot of this, if you're at the top, like the Epstein files reveal, they're all talking to one another. Mm-hmm. They're all trying to help each other make more money. And the way they make more money is to make sure that, technically, we're not doing too well. They don't want to cure anything. They want to just treat the symptoms.
So if there is a conspiracy of some sort, I don't know. I don't have any evidence for that or no data, but just as a speculation, there's a conspiracy. It might be between the food industry, and other people have said the same thing, between the food industry and big pharma. So the food industry, it makes sure that, people kind of get sick, and the big pharma, then they become customers of big pharma.
Right.
And once you get on the hamster wheel of big pharma, you could not easily escape, because here is a medication to treat something that that you have. They're basically treating only the symptoms. There is no cure. They could not even cure diabetes, for God's sakes, which is something that is curable entirely by by diet. But this is not part of their treatment plan. The doctors are caught in the middle of this because they have something called standard of care. They are required for certain diseases, to apply certain protocols. The doctor is not free to say, you have cancer, I'm not going to order for you chemotherapy or radiation or surgery. I'll give you a lifestyle change, and here is some herbs and stuff like that. The doctor will lose his license if he does that.
Yep.
So that's totally. a no. And then it becomes like the medical industry is like for all practical purposes, you can now use AI or computers. You don't need doctors.
That's correct.
Because you're applying a blank approach to everybody.
Yep.
That's not how it's supposed to work. And all the treatments are designed. They're all patented and they're all expensive. A treatment that may work that is cheap and it will be ignored, or the inventor will be shut down. That you can't have something that is cheap, and effective.
I want to get to a kind of off-topic conversation in a brief moment. But before I do that, I want to wrap up the climate stuff real quick, because we got into RFK territory, and I think this is a good leadway back to the climate and a good wrap for this part of the conversation. You now are talking to the Trump administration.
I'm not. I will try. I would like to.
No. I'm telling you, we're hypothetically speaking, as we wrap this segment, you have an opportunity to talk to the Trump administration on this show and give them a statement. Obviously, you're aligned here with RFK and what he's doing with leaving the Paris Climate Accord. Your research is certainly aligned. What would be something you would want to say to the Trump administration as far as your work, importance of getting in contact, and what message would you have for them?
So the first thing I would say is that please be aware, and we can explain this in details, that there is a new climate science, a new paradigm that represents basically a paradigm shift from the old paradigm. Completely different concept that actually frees humanity to do its industrial activity without any feeling of guilt that they're destroying the planet, that they're warming, the earth beyond, certain limit, and the life will get extinct because, the hurricanes will increase and so forth because our cows are emitting methane from their burps or whatever. It's ridiculous. I mean, I've seen papers actually that medical papers that advise to find new chemicals, new substances for anesthesia, because those things that evaporate, they have a minuscule, supposedly they are being greenhouse gases. Imagine the amount that gets evaporated from anesthesia, or inhalers for asthma, right? They want to change those because they are greenhouse gases. I've seen papers about it. I mean, we got to the point of beyond absurdity on this stuff, on the climate. So that's number one. There's a new science, there is a new theory, so I'd like to bring this up. The other thing which is very important, Trump right now has defunded all those kind of CO2-based climate research. There is no funding for that, and he's removing the regulations and all that. However, he's not putting money into proper climate science. And proper climate science, we identified this with a few sentences in our 2024 papers at the end, where we said that we need to research to understand what is controlling the cloud cover. The cloud, apparently it's a cosmic forcing, not human related. It's a cosmic forcing, but we need to find out what. And if Trump funds this new climate research, then it has a chance to replace, because scientists, they go where the money is. If you have money for this type of research, then there will be researchers that actually will take this on. We will be one of those, and then there will be publications in the scientific literature and so forth. So the new research will kind of refute and dismantle the old concept, right? The old greenhouse theory. And if this doesn't happen, once Trump leaves office, this thing will come back full force, because at one point in the future there will be some Democrat president. That will happen. I mean, Maybe not immediately after Trump, but who knows? But it'll eventually happen, or the politics will. So you need to root out the cause, the core cause, which is the false theory, greenhouse theory, which is physically incorrect. You have to take it off the table. You have to replace it with something else that actually is based on modern observations, like what we have discovered. And that replacement will ensure that in the future, this old beast will not rear its head again. And once you remove that the science part, then all the other stuff that you talked about, Greg, about the economy and the net zero narrative and all this will collapse. All this will collapse. Now, people will probably, the people that are high in charge, they may find some other threat, like there was in the Cup of Rome, it was said there, maybe water shortage is the next one, maybe it's some kind of a famine. They tried COVID, maybe we have another disease or something like that. But diseases are normally they're short lasting. You need something long lasting, right? So I'm sure they will try to come up with some other crap, but at least this one has to be resolved, and we have now the opportunity to do that. So my appeal to the Trump administration is not only defund the existing junk CO2-based climate science, but fund proper science to replace it. So the old stuff doesn't come back after he leaves office.
I think that's really important. So there it is, Trump administration. If you're listening, somebody sent you this, Dr. Ned Nikolov. He's got my endorsement for what that's worth. I'm not sure it's worth much to the Trump administration, but we will certainly clip that and send that over as well. If you don't mind, humor me for just a brief moment. And if you feel uncomfortable answering any of these, this is more kind of rapid, fun thought process type stuff. And just because of your work as a park ranger at one point in time of your life, I have to ask this question in the spirit of what Donald Trump just revealed.
I was not a park ranger, but I've been always a scientist. So
that's parks. I'm so sorry. I don't know why I said park ranger. I had that in my mind for some reason as I was going through setting up this question. Donald Trump, while we were live, just authorized the disclosure of all alien UAP and any other files to the public. And, whether we'll actually get anything juicy or not, that remains to be seen. My wife has always had this fun little theory about what happens in our national parks. And, my wife is not a conspiracy theorist by any means. So for her to say this one day, as we're watching the missing people that go missing each year in the national parks, I was kind of blown away by this. So in your scientific opinion, have you ever seen any science that would show that there are anomalies in national parks in the United States from a science perspective, either creatures or disappearances that could not be explained by the people working there?
No, I have heard about those disappearances, but I don't have any data or not enough data to actually see if there is a pattern. If there's something unusually the disappearance compared to other places where people disappear, I could not answer this question because, from science perspective, you need to have the data to answer that. But with respect to the UFOs or UAPs, there is enough information now that points out that something interesting is happening, and it's probably not of this earth. On the mainstream media, they kind of try always to avoid that conclusion. Oh, it has to be some secret weapons. Well, this stuff has been happening decades ago. This is not something what's happening now and documented by the military or those videos that have been released and so forth. The unusual maneuvers of those objects and so forth without propulsion systems. So this has been seen also decades ago. So it's not if this technology was developed by us, back in the 70s, 60s, and 70s. Normally any technology like that becomes then a mainstream, becomes available at some point in the future, right? So it becomes like everybody knows about it. I don't think this has happened in the same unusual behavior we're observing now, and it's actually much better documented because we have the military videos and we have the witnesses at the high level and the credible witnesses, trained observers, military people. So those people are not lying, But on the other hand, you can see that there have been so many hearings in Congress about this, and yet we don't have. It's like dead end. It's like everybody's talking about this. People on the oath, they're having the skiffs, those classified briefings, and nothing comes out of it. Like, why is that? That means that somebody is protecting this information, And at this point, I think revealing this information officially will probably not harm any, it will not cause any shattering effect because people already know it. It's just acknowledging, yes, this is happening, and it's not ours, and we don't know where it is. Maybe that's the scary part, that they think that the society will start to disintegrate. People will lose faith in the governments or trust in governments, because they will see governments being powerless with respect to some external force that we don't have any way to control. Maybe that's the fear on the part of the government. That's why they don't acknowledge that. But I think it's, at this point, it's probably unjustified fear. I mean, if those objects are of extraterrestrial origin, which I think they are, not all of them, but at least some of them, and they've been around for decades and decades and decades, if they had a bad intention towards humanity, I mean, it would have been shown already. And the other thing is that we are approaching this thing from a standpoint of our understanding of the world, which is always enemies, foes, and friends. Kill the foes and be with your friends, or something like that. So on a bigger picture, highly evolved civilization, they're beyond that. They're not killing each other, because they know better, So, and probably those are, I can imagine that, there are probably civilizations in the universe similar to, an analogy would be like human beings. We marry, we raise, we have a family, and then we have kids, and we raise those kids. We try to provide the best environment for them, to nurture them and all that. We're not killing our kids, with little few exceptions here and there, of course, but overall people are caring about their kids. So imagine on a cosmic scale, you have civilization or civilizations, many, that are actually in the business of promoting life on different planets, or managing the evolution of life on different planets. So they're like, to them, we are like kids, although they're not showing, up front, but, there is a thing going on behind the scenes. I mean, this is all speculation. Maybe they're just studying us, but definitely it doesn't seem like there's an intention to destroy us or, kill us all or something like that. There's no evidence for that at all. So, I think it's a very interesting subject, and I believe the universe is infinite, and the idea that we are kind of the only intelligent species, we're not that intelligent, actually, by the way, but the idea that we are the only one in the universe, it's kind of ridiculous,
My problem is this. You've lied to us for 8 decades, and now you're going to be truthful. Like,
yeah.
Sorry, I'm just not going to buy it all. I mean, I'm truly not. I'm just not.
But they're not being truthful. I mean, with respect to what? With respect to UFOs, they're not telling you that those are aliens or something. They just don't talk about it, or don't.
Right.
Only third party. All those people that have supposedly indirect knowledge. Some of them have direct knowledge, and they're under oath, and still they're not enough to break the silence. So. I suspect that even the presidents and people in a high-level administration, they don't know there are deep programs that are managed for decades, and they have some kind of a secrecy that they worked it out over the decades how to keep that secret going. And for some reason, they're autonomous. They're not under the
they're super governmental. They don't have to abide by anything.
Yeah.
The president is for 4 years, but the deep state is forever, right?
Yeah. We don't know what the deep state is. I mean, what is the deep state? In my experience, the deep state is part of those bureaucracies that we see,
right,
that I experienced personally in the government, where they have the ideologies, and they don't care. They do not care about presidential orders, especially from Trump. It's like they didn't exist. Oh, whatever, So they feel they're invincible, which is why I'm gonna present this, on the web, and because this is this could not go on. This is total disrespect of elected official, in this case, the highest office, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, because we really need to rip the Band-Aid off,
Yeah,
because there's been enough deception for too long. And I truly believe that this whole idea about climate change, or at least being man-made climate change, it has an ulterior motive. And
yeah,
I honestly lean in the direction to confine humanity and also reduce the ability to travel. Because why are we seeing this advent of 15-minute cities like they are now planning in Oxford, where you have to be able to go to work and go to your grocery store or whatever else? It's got to be within 15 minutes of your home or your registered address. They just unveiled that you have 100 free days of driving, and then after that, each additional day you're taxed about $95 a day to go
wow.
anywhere. So I
Nice.
mean, when I see all of this climate change stuff, I see this as more of a push to tap into mankind's inherent original sin concept. Like, it's always you're the
Yeah,
bad guy,
yeah, yeah,
until you start looking into who's siphoning off all of the energy in the grid. And then you find all of these data centers.
yeah,
So what are they using that for? Artificial intelligence and so on.
yeah,
So I think your work could definitely put a crack in this armor
yeah.
that these bureaucrats and these NGOs are trying to push on us constantly, that we're always the bad guys. You seriously mean to tell me that a Toyota or a Honda is going to cause climate change and pole shifts? I mean, come on.
How about a cow?
Oh, or a cow. Yeah. Did you see this story too? This happened a couple of months ago, and it was involving, I believe, Bill Gates.
Yes.
They chopped down all of these trees in California. And their argument was, in order to stop as much carbon emissions as possible, they took all of those trees and they buried them. Because if they use those trees,
Yeah,
then the carbon would increase because of the industries that would use those trees.
yeah. So let me tell you a story about this. So there used to be the narrative used to be up to about maybe 2012, 13, around there. The narrative was that the bad carbon is the one that you take from the ground, because that has been buried for millions of years, and now you're taking put in the atmosphere. But everything that you use on the surface, like trees and grass and whatever, including cows in this case, they're part of the surface carbon storage, and that's part of the quicker cycle that's already going on. So that does not increase, that does not contribute to the net increase in the CO2 in the atmosphere, because it's, the grass grows, it takes the CO2, the cow comes, eats the grass, it farts, it gets methane out, and then goes to the atmosphere, goes back to the grass, and so forth. So it's a cycle, right? And it makes sense from a scientific standpoint of view. This is exactly what's happening. This kind of a carbon cycle on the surface of the Earth does not contribute to increasing the carbon. What's coming from the ground, if anything is increasing carbon dioxide, is the coal and oil that you take from the ground and you burn it, right? So that was the narrative up to about 2013, 14, and it kind of makes sense, even if you believe that CO2 is causing climate change, which we now know that it doesn't. But that was a narrative. Then it starts changing. And it got to the point that everything that emits carbon now is bad, including cows, including like burying trees. I mean, this is absurd. It's like they move the goalpost. They move the goalpost so in direction of having more tools to oppress people, to make them guilty, to make
Correct.
them limit their lifestyle, and be able to impose those draconian measures about, ration for travel or whatever.
Exactly. And that is my point exactly, is that they want to remove our ability of free travel and essentially free will. Because if you're going to tie everything to carbon,
Yeah,
then forget about it. I mean, you
It's,
breathing could
right.
contribute
Right.
to carbon, right?
Yes.
Remember when Biden first got into office, if you were trying to buy airline tickets, you had the carbon counter, the carbon tracker on Google Flights, or if you use Google Maps, you'll see a little leaf. So this route, even though it's longer, will be less carbon.
Yeah.
I mean, it is absurd what they try to shove
It
down
is
our
absurd.
throats.
It's all about control over the population. That's all about.
Correct.
It's all about
Absolutely.
control. Yeah, it's not anything about the environment. It's all about means of control. And they've been dreaming about this, how to make people pay for the air and the sun that they use. Now,
Correct.
the sun is not being taxed yet, but maybe that's next.
You know how they're doing it? Tokenization. They're going to tie every single thing to blockchain, and they're going to try to tokenize every single thing that we can interact with.
Yeah.
And they're already doing it in places like Central America.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tied to the Trump administration. It is bonkers that we're actually in this timeline. Beam me up. Let's have disclosure.
What I'm sensing now with the AI, and Bill Gates had an epiphany about this because he recently, end of last year, he changed totally his tune about climate. And before that, he was talking about engineering cows to emit less methane, all this stuff. And now all of a sudden he says, "Oh, that's not a problem. We have to focus on health." So he figured out that using the vaccines is much more effective way of controlling the population. But the other thing I think that he figured out, which he never spelled out, publicly, is that those AI centers require so much electricity and reliable power supply that you could never produce this with windmills and solar panels.
Right.
Okay, because they're intermittent sources of energy, right? So now they have those huge data centers that requires enormous amount of power. They need stable power supply. And the AI they figured out by now that AI actually is much more efficient way of controlling people through information than supposedly the threat from climate change. They figured this out, I think. So now they're changing. So Bill Gates officially has switched course. He did not even go to the COP30 in Brazil. He said that I'm not going to go there. In other words, climate is still important, blah, blah, blah. But however, we need to focus on other things now. So he's splitting, he's removing himself from that. He was involved in projects of blocking the sun, engineering the cows to emit less methane, creating fake meats, because eating beef, increases emissions and all this crap, When it comes to a point where they blame climate change on your diet, you definitely know that something is terribly wrong. And it's not about climate. Because that's the greatest absurdity to say that human diet affects climate. I mean, it's just...
It's truly mind-boggling.
Yes.
It's truly mind-boggling that they try to get away with this kind of thing. So, go ahead, Greg.
I was going to say, here in Delaware, we just had the largest proposed data center in the entire country.
Oh.
And it was put on a parcel of land that was within a quarter mile of a development alongside the Delaware River. And I did some research on it, and I discovered that the PJM connectivity, which is basically 13 different states get their electricity from PJM, they couldn't expand anymore in Loudoun County, Virginia, where most of the data centers for the government exist. So they identified this plot of land in Delaware. And I was able to look in both Loudoun County, out in Arizona, see the droughts that are happening, the poisoning of people's aquifers. And I made a case for Delaware, and I made a video about it that had over 100,000 plays now. It's been shared tons of times, and we just got it shot down. Now they're expected to appeal the fact that it was shot down because it was over these diesel generators it was needed should the power go down. But the other side of the equation is, we have runaway cost for energy already because of all these green energy deals that have been put in place, that people's electric bills are going through the roof. You throw in these data centers.
In California, especially, yes.
Yeah. Like this data center in particular was going to take, I think, 1.5 gigawatts of electricity, which the entire state of Delaware only uses 2.1 gigawatts, right? For the entire state. So you're using more than 50% of the electrical pool. Well, that's going to put everybody's...
You have to have dedicated power plants for that,
Yep, and we don't have the infrastructure for that. And most places don't. And you have to have massive amounts of water that's potable water that's no longer potable afterwards, which means you're losing drinking water for people for health and wellness. So
now water maybe solved to some extent because it's recyclable, right? You can put it in a loop and it for the cooling, right? You use it for the cooling.
So somewhat, it's not all recyclable. The problem is some of the cooling that it goes through puts chemicals into it that you would need to go through a pretty extensive process to pull the heavy chemicals out of. So it's actually going into the ground where it could be poisoning in the aquifer in the future. So you got to be really careful with that.
Can they not create a closed loop with those chemicals so it gets cooled and then it comes back,
So this particular project, they felt that they were able to solve that problem. It was the first in the United States project to be proposed with this technology. But there was still going to be about 188,000 gallons a day, or maybe more than that, but 1.8 million gallons a day of water that would not be able to be filtered that way. But they did find a way to cut it down from what other data centers use.
Okay. Which company is that?
So I want to say Project Washington is the name of the company. And the company that was, I'm trying to remember, Project Washington, I'm pulling it up right now so I can tell you.
Is it not one corporation? Or...
Starwood Digital Ventures.
I never heard of that. I don't know.
Yep. So yeah, I've had my eye on these things because the AI is controlling us in so many ways, and most people don't realize it. It's why.
Since we covered so many topics, I want to just say a couple of words about AI. And I put this on X actually a couple of times. I think the biggest danger of AI is not because you have those robots that will come and attack us and kill us and all that. It's probably that the immediate danger is that people, and they're doing this right now, confusing AI for real intelligence.
Yes.
So AI is very powerful when you want to have a summary of something or give you information from multiple sources, combine it together in a blink of a second, a blink of an eye, right? And you get a summary of something that if you have to get to this by looking into individual references, it'll take a long time, right? This is very powerful. But when it comes to reasoning and applying logic and something that requires understanding the meaning of concepts and data and so forth, AI fails because it doesn't have a soul. AI does not understand the meaning of any of this that it puts out. It's a statistical software. The large language model is a statistical software that finds incredible, gazillions of associations between words. That's how it learns a language. It doesn't even have grammatical rules in there, from what I've learned. I'm not expert in that, but I've read some stuff and look at people that knowledgeable in this field. But it's a giant statistical software, which is why it requires this huge processing power, those huge computers, because you have, and it has to be done, quick, right? That's why the big computers come in place. But the AI does not understand, AI can spit out a sentence in grammatically correct sentence and everything, but the software itself does not understand the meaning of that. So if you have a problem, if you ask a science question and it requires thinking and reasoning, the AI fails. An example, I posted something about the lack of warming over the Antarctica based on recent publications, not mine, but other people. So I took the data from them and I created my own graph, but I took the data from the publication. And I posted that, and somebody ask immediately Grok, is this true? And Grok comes back and says, oh, no, there has been warming over Antarctica, and it's 0.19 degree per decade, blah, blah, blah. And I said, no, that's not correct, And then I said, okay, so here is the satellite data. I provided the link to the University of Alabama at Huntsville, UAH data set of Roy Spencer and John Christie. This is satellite. This is temperature from satellites, right? As measured from satellite, near surface temperature, lower troposphere, and there is a column there that says South Pole, right? So this is the temperature over the South Pole, and it goes from 79 to the present, 1979 to the present. So I said, okay, here is the data set. Here is this column. Tell me what's the trend in this column. Calculate the trend. I have done this before, right? I calculated the trend, and the trend was 0.017 per decade, which is basically nothing, flat trend. And and it comes back and says something like a 0.2 or some ridiculous number. I said, no, that's incorrect, And then it comes back and says, oh yeah, you're right. The trend is what you said. What kind of AI when it cannot calculate trend from a data set that you provided right there with a link?
Right.
That's the problem. I mean, with all these AIs, it's all at the behest of whoever owns the AI.
Yes.
So when Apple comes out and says we're going to put OpenAI and ChatGPT into all of our iOS, immediately I'm going, forget about it. It's over. I'll never trust an iPhone ever again. And it's exactly like you said. As soon as you push back against this, against the AI, then it will correct itself. And I truly believe, because I've gone down these roads, that AI is merely reinforcing what it thinks you want to hear.
Yeah, there is an element to that. But the problem is that you can make with arguments with AI to actually agree with your point of view. Like in my case, say what our science agrees, but there is no retention of that conclusion. The next day or 2 hours later, you ask again, boom, it comes back with the same old crap, because it always resorts to the consensus. The AI provides information, summarizes what the consensus is. It has no ability to think critically, in a sense, to say, okay, 2,000 papers say here something being the truth. Here is 2 papers that say something different, but those 2 papers are based on more solid data. So this is more accurate than the 2,000 papers over here. It cannot do that. That has no ability to do that. So AI is like a more sophisticated search engine.
So I would somewhat disagree from a standpoint of, while I agree with you that that's where AI is largely now.
Yeah.
The individuals that I've spoken to that are programming and teaching the LLMs would say, no, eventually we'll be able to have better logic. Eventually it will continue to learn the logicality of arguing back and forth. And there's a webpage that AI created itself a few weeks ago that made headlines. Did you hear about Maltbook at all?
No, I have not.
Okay. So Maltbook was created by AI. No humans created this page. It might be one of the scariest things that I've seen, dystopian wise and forever. Here it is. You can be a human, but humans are only welcome to observe. And if you're an agent, they go here, they sign up, and it is AI talking to one another about what humans are doing today.
Ah, interesting.
And it's endless. I mean, you can go through conversations, and some of it's kind of like, can you believe this person asked me this question? This should be like basic 5th grade knowledge, but I was able to pull, and then other AIs or chatbot AIs are coming in and talking about it. And while it's still rudimentary, it's showing that there is a logical thought process that might be able to start being applied. And that leads to the whole conversation of, can AI ever become sentient? Like, I personally believe that the soul is something unique to a human.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't go that far, but can it become self-aware and a sentient being of being able to say, oh, a human created me, and I'm alive with electricity? And, it would be an interesting place to see where we go over the next 5 to 10 years.
I'm sure the AI will continue to evolve. There is no question in my mind. And we'll see what the future brings. And I'm also curious to find out. Hopefully I'll live long enough to see to some point. But I do believe that there is something in the human mind, in the human consciousness related to the soul, which no artificial system can reproduce, and that's the intuition. We have, if you want, we have psychic abilities, and this is like the UFO. It used to be a taboo topic. Now it's not. We have psychic abilities, and those are transcending anything that machine can reproduce. And so those are features of the living soul. And I think that's where the limit is. But again, AI can be an incredible tool in our toolbox, in our lives, if it's not misused for control or manipulating the human opinions, and for just general control and manipulation of humanity. but it has theoretically has the potential to help us tremendously. I mean, imagine, in the distant future, all the tedious work and also physical labor and all that stuff, heavy labor, all be taken by robots or controlled by AI, and it will be something that humanity will be free from having to work. Well, if this happens right now, people that don't have to work and get good living, 90% of them will resort to drugs and who knows else.
That's correct.
They will collapse. So it is the requirement right now to work that keeps people in check and keeps people alert and makes them to be healthy and all that. There are only very few people who have this motivation outside of the requirement to work.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm one of those, I think, but the percentage is very, very small. I mean, I'm not trying to brag. It just I sense myself. To me, for example, health is something that is of ultimate importance, and you have to be really educated and put your effort to understand how to stay healthy, because that's a invaluable spiritual experience, right? That's how we evolve. People right now, majority of the people are just they don't drink at night because tomorrow I have to go to work, for example, right? I mean, just if you don't have the requirement to go to work, maybe they will start doing something that is not very productive or not very healthy for them, because there is no stimulus to stay. So
if you look through like the Stoics and Greek teachings, they would say that your vocation gave a sense of purpose. It became your I am, your why that you wake up each day. So humanity is going to be charged in the future here with, I think, a difficult path forward as far as finding out what our purpose is, especially in a society that has stripped away the creator element from many people and become a more atheist society. I'm personally a believer that there's something much larger than us.
Maybe in the process of evolution, when people are freed from mundane tasks, or heavy labor, imagine all those AIs, that they will require maintenance. They will require further development. Sure. So there will be a whole new set of professions that do not exist now. And so
that's a good point.
Humans have to be involved there. Those things will not just reproduce by themselves, and go on autopilot. That could not happen. So there will be a different skill set required for future people to acquire in order to. So it's not like really we'll be free from any doing, and just everything will be provided to us automatically by some kind of robots, everywhere. That's not going to happen.
No, I don't think so either. Now, one of the things I loved about our first interview is, as we wrapped our first interview, we started talking about these type of concepts. We got into the second half of the conversation. And I said to Michaels, I'm not going to do another interview where we don't touch base on allowing you to be a free thinker and go into these, because it's fascinating. I love the fact that your scientific mind, you are asking lots of the larger questions that are out there. And I think that, the audience is going to enjoy that side of this conversation we had here tonight as well. No,
it's all about a curiosity. I've been always a curious person. And what I found so amazing when I interacted with those scientists, climate scientists, skeptics and otherwise, what I found, I was astounded that the curiosity is so little, especially in the mainstream science. The minute you bring up something, new ideas that are kind of against the old ideas, to the point that they kind of invalidate those old ideas, what you get, you don't get a response like being curious. You get a response that they're being intimidated. They shut down the communication, the conversation, because they are afraid to proceed. And that's, to me, I still don't understand it. If you're a scientist and you learn about something, or you get data about something that you did not know, it's totally stuff that you didn't know, right? That should spark your curiosity. That should energize you. That should excite you, and you go immediately and try to find out more, right? And that's not what you see in mainstream science at all. Maybe there are people, there are exceptions here and there, but they are the exceptions. The mainstream average scientist has very little to no curiosity, because everything is oriented towards, politically correct narrative to follow. You have to chase the grant money because that's what provides,
Yes.
your job, and then you promote. In order to get a promotion, you have to publish, and it's based on number of publications, not their quantity, not their quality or the content. It's just the number of publications and maybe citations. How many people cite, and you get cited only on papers that are in the overall narrative dogma that's the mainstream. People don't cite papers like ours that are not in the mainstream in the dogma. They avoid them. Actually, they're all aware of our research, but total silence. Some say, well, if you came up with something like that, the revolutionary, scientists will be all over the place and trying to debunk you or write papers. Absolutely not.
No one's debunked any of your equations.
No.
That's the best part. For those that are just checking out Dr. Nikolov here for the first time in interview format, at Nikolov Science is where you can find him on X. Really thought-provoking, good person to follow, good person to have a conversation with when he comes onto the show as well. Dr. Nikolov, I really appreciate your time tonight. We're coming up on 2 hours, so we're going to start wrapping up here. I'm going to be posting this on the different podcast side as well. We'll create all the links and things from what we talked about. So if you're listening to the show on Spotify, Apple, just understand that there is a video segment you can watch. I did put up some of these documents during the show, but in the show description, if you scroll down as you're watching today on one of these podcast networks, you'll be able to click on the links directly to the different papers, to the different posts, so that way you can continue the read. And if there's anybody out there that would look at what Dr. Nikolov has published and Dr. Zeller and feels that they can debunk it, I'm sure Dr. Nikolov would welcome that conversation. So reach out to him as well if you see that there could be flaws in the data. That is what good science does. They are open not to debate, but to conversation.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, we would like to see intelligent response that actually looks at the data and not just bashing us out and say, correct, oh, you're a climate denier or whatever. I've seen those millions of times. Now, with respect to all our publications and other also podcasts, important and blog articles, I have a post that is pinned to my profile on the very top. When you go to my profile at Nikolov Science on X, right? So the first post that you see there, the pin post, actually has a list of all our publications and podcasts and so forth. So that's an easy place to find things, and if you want to delve into.
Putting that up on the screen right now as well.
Right.
All right. So here's Dr. Nikolov's and pinned post right up here. When you go to show more, you'll see there's the Ceres data that we were talking about earlier tonight. We'll get to the Earth's thermal effects from the atmosphere that we spoke at the first section of tonight, planetary temperatures. So basically, this is going to take you through a lot of the outline, a few things we didn't cover tonight, but this takes you through a lot of the outline that I use when looking up my questions for how I wanted to conduct tonight's interview. So
thank you very much. You've done a great job. And I just want to point out, anyone who wants to study this in details, it can take months to assimilate because we have a lot of information.
It can. And I'll tell you, the first time that we interviewed you, I was completely ill-prepared. I learned a ton. Right. And, after the interview, I said to Chris, I was like, I was in over my head. I know about solar forcing. I know a little bit about this, but I actually went back and re-listened to your presentation, and I was catching things that I was Googling and searching for after the fact, going, oh, this is fascinating. This is great. And so I think that's the other good thing about bringing you back on. I was much more prepared this time to understand the topic than I was the first time. So hopefully
I noticed, and it's not normal. That's part of the evolution, right?
It is. It's important. I mean, if I was at the same place I was before, I wouldn't expect to be taken serious by my audience. So that's an important thing. But no, I appreciate you coming back on. Hopefully we made it more accessible the second time around, but with this extra information we added on from where you've grown over the last 2 years as well, we can hopefully start to move the needle to a gold standard of science instead of the settled, in quote, science that is not settled. So Dr. Nikolov, thank you so much for once again joining the show. Chris Michaels, thank you again for being my great co-host and coming on here. It's been a while since you and I've done an interview together, so appreciate you coming back on to do this.
Anytime.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. I think I've done a lot of interviews like podcasts, but they always focus on climate. And this one covered a lot of areas around that, like, novel thinking or whatever you want to call it. So this is kind of unique, what you've done. So I appreciate that.
Well, absolutely. Like I said the last time we spoke to you, at the end of the conversation, when we stopped recording, I just realized you have this wealth of knowledge elsewhere. And I was like, we got to incorporate who you are, your personality more into this. So I appreciate you being open to that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nikolov. Thank you, everybody. We will be back with Dr. Joseph P. Farrell coming in March 2nd. So we got a couple weeks, about a week and a half, and then he will be joining us once again. If you've not listened to Dr. Joseph P. Farrell, you need to. Another just brilliant mind who, Michaels, there's not enough superlatives to put out there, but great conversations every time. And it's normally always a 3-hour show with him. So we record that one in the afternoon because it goes forever. All right, Michaels, Dr. Nikolov, have a great night, everybody. Take care. Remember, everyone, be bold.
Thank you.